everyone, it's Fitz with another edition of Deep Purple, the extended version of the daily delivery. Last time we addressed what's going on in the Pac-12 and how the Big 12 might end up getting 4 new schools, all hypotheticals, and this one is also a hypothetical. But as the Pac-12 continues to fumble around and try to get their media rights deal ironed out, nothing much is happening. It's come as a great frustration to all of us who are attempting to follow what is actually happening. Now, June 30th is the end of the fiscal year, and everyone expects that media rights deal to be set by then, but will it? We don't know. It seems essential. We're already seeing institutions having to get creative with numbers to project budgets. I've had some fans say, why is this so important to get done in a year in advance? Well, academic entities got to have budgets. They project way into the future, and to not have sound numbers a year away from a projected budget on something as important for your athletics media rights deal is pretty vital, if you ask me. But let's steer away from the Pac-12. Let's steer into another topic today that really does deal with the essential hypothetical that something could happen here with the ACC. Now, if you follow along with all this conference realignment, some from the ACC side of things will say, no, this is not going to happen. They've got a media rights deal in place well into the 2030s. They've got a grant of rights that is unbreakable. That sounds like Mr. Howell. But is it? Because others say, well, the grant of rights is tough to get around, but dissolving the conference might be the way to do it. Then the grant of rights doesn't mean much at all. So today on Deep Purple, we're going to look at the ACC with the hypothetical that they can't resolve their issues, that they can't get past this and they can't move on, and eventually the conference comes apart. And here's why. Here's the latest numbers from conferences. This is the 21-22 fiscal years. As I said, the 23 year is about to end, and we won't get these numbers. All the money won't be in until much later on. Probably early next summer, we'll get the 23 numbers. But look how far behind the ACC is in the revenues distributed by the conference to schools, to each individual school on average. Big Ten is up there already ahead of the SEC. The Big 12 is third, kind of a sizable gap there between the SEC and Big 12, but also a pretty notable gap down to the Pac-12 and then down to the ACC that is already struggling. This isn't just the media rights. Let's be clear. This is the entire payment out. This includes the cuts of bowl revenue, the cuts of the NCAA tournament revenue. This includes all of that and other things that probably are more nominal in their amounts. But you can see why the ACC is in trouble financially, and they are ironclad locked into that deal. And ESPN isn't going to give it up. They've got a huge advantage here. So what's going to happen if the ACC members that want to get out, and it sounds like at least 7 of the 15 want to, and now reports of maybe 8 or 9. Other ones are realizing, hey, even the Big 12 is going to be a huge financial advantage for us. Now, as we go back to these numbers, I want you to keep something in mind. The Pac-12 will hopefully soon have their new deal. Kirk Schultz, the president of Washington State, seems to indicate that this deal will be flat. It'll be much like this. In the Big 12's new deal, without Oklahoma and Texas, actually, the per-school payout is expected to rise, and it will probably rise. Big Ten and SEC, when their deals kick in, well, that gap's going to get bigger, and that's a problem for everyone else. But if you're the ACC and you're staring at making half the money of the Big Ten already, well, you're going to start wanting to look around a little bit. And here's the real kicker for the ACC. All 4 of the other conferences, even the Pac-12 that is still trying to wrap up their upcoming deal, every one of those conferences will renegotiate again before the ACC can. And that's a problem. That's the ACC. That's the ACC with Notre Dame. And we're not really going to talk much about Notre Dame here, but I'll say this about the Irish. If they want to go to the Big Ten, they will have an opportunity either with an ACC round of realignment, or if the Big Ten turns their attention to the Pac-12 at some point, Notre Dame would actually probably be part of that. Why? Well, they already have USC coming to the Big Ten, which is a traditional opponent for Notre Dame. I think that they would be packaged with Stanford and 2 other Pac-12 North schools, choosing between Cal, Washington, and Oregon. Probably Washington and Oregon. They are all ACC schools, and that's something you're going to need to remember. The ACC accreditation is so important to the Big Ten. Now, let's get back to the ACC, though, and that's what it looks like on a map with the tiny logos. They're too tiny, and here's a better listing of that. But again, let's remove Notre Dame. But hold on. Well, I got to go back here. Real quick, Notre Dame, notice the asterisk. Notre Dame and Miami, I put them there together because they just got their ACC accreditation. What a coincidence for the Big Ten. If they want ACC members that are AAU, boy, that gets confusing. Wow, you get those two. But let's remove them, and let's focus right now on the draft, because if the ACC comes apart, the Big Ten and SEC are going to be first in line. And I think it's going to be the Big Ten first in line because of that academic country club called the AAU. These schools will want to be elite in athletics, but also not ignore their academic prowess, their stuffy ways with that academic stuff. So who will the Big Ten get first? Well, I know that the SEC would want both Virginia and North Carolina because they're massive schools in huge states with viewership. They're not particularly great football programs, but if you're the Big Ten, that's who you want. And I'm telling you, folks, that's who they'll get first, followed by, well, Miami. How convenient that they got that status. Who's the 4th school? Well, if it's not Notre Dame in this grouping, it's probably Duke, because Duke and Carolina are kind of tied together, but there's a possibility that maybe it's not Duke. Maybe it's Pitt, but people in the Big Ten say we already have Penn State. We don't really want Pitt. So what's the SEC do? And let's be clear here. Some of these schools will probably likely end up in the Big 12, but the Big 12 will get what's left over. And the amazing thing is the ACC has so many quality institutions that there are enough to fill Big 12 slots, and yet their rights deal, their media deal is pitiful. It makes no sense. It's pure mismanagement, and here comes the SEC. They like football. There you go. Those are 2 football brands. And oh, yeah, that's probably what's next. Virginia Tech has a good brand in football. And North Carolina State is kind of the one I wasn't sure about, but I've heard them tied to the SEC. And once you look at what's available, I don't see Georgia Tech getting a bid with Georgia right there in the state, but North Carolina would be a new state for the SEC. Now let's get to the Big 12. Who would be their first additions? And these 2 make sense. Georgia Tech is an engineering school of elite status, and they would certainly fit in with all the engineering schools, the land-grant schools around the Big 12. And there's Louisville, which almost got a Big 12 invite at one point and seems like a logical addition. Coming in next probably would be Pitt. Pitt fans tell me they don't want anything to do with the Big 12. But if you look at those numbers in the conference payout, they're going to come around real quick, I bet. And the 4th one for this endeavor, I'm going to add Boston College. Boston College or Syracuse would be on equal footing. But as Brett Yormark tries to lean into Eastern markets, Eastern presence with this and his basketball initiative down the road, adding Boston and possibly having UConn, which kind of gets you on the doorstep of New York, having possibly a Villanova, which gets you into Philly. It seems like Boston College. But there is, of course, Notre Dame lingering out there. What if Notre Dame does go in this round? They do join. Well, that more than likely knocks Duke out of the Big Ten and makes them available for the SEC, which wouldn't want them probably due to football, and the Big 12. And I think they would take that 4th spot if the Big 12 offered, because the Big 12 wants to put together the elite basketball conference. And that's what it looks like when you boil it all down to the conferences. The Big 10 being in green, the SEC being in their bright yellow, the lavender, of course, being the K-State guy, that's the Big 12. And Wake Forest, Syracuse, and maybe Boston College are left behind to try to figure out how to handle this situation now without having a conference. Same thing some big or Pac-12 schools will be going through, and I'll be interested to see if those schools all kind of try to align or if there's something else that the schools can do to save themselves. Well, that's it. That's what I think would happen if the ACC did come apart. And I don't know when that will happen, if ever that will happen. But it's fun to look at as I kill time trying to figure out what the heck is going on in the Pac-12. I have no idea at this point. We hopefully will find out by month's end. But somehow, I doubt it.